My son looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't come for Christmas. I don't care about you anymore." Not a hint of shame. Not a tremor in his voice, just cold certainty. Like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. My wife, Mabel, stood beside me holding a casserole. She'd spent the whole morning preparing, and I watched her fingers tighten around the dish until her knuckles went white. Their hallway smelled like cinnamon, fake and festive. Completely wrong for a moment that felt like someone tearing the floor out from under us. I opened my mouth to say something, anything but the words stuck. I felt 70 years old all at once, like age had landed on me in one brutal second. Rowan added, "Seriously, Dad, don't make this dramatic. We just want a peaceful holiday without interruptions." Interruptions. That's what we were now. I turned, walked out without a word, because looking at his face made something bitter rise in my throat. Outside, the cold December air hit me hard, sharper than it should have. I started the car, waiting for Mabel to settle in. And for a moment we just sat there, two old people who suddenly felt unnecessary. Halfway home, trying to steady myself, I murmured, "Subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments how old you are and where you're from. For you it's just a small thing, but for me, it's the reason I keep telling these stories." Mabel didn't say anything, just rested her hand on my arm the way she does when she knows I'm hurting more than I admit. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked dim, undecorated, tired, or maybe that was just us. I shut off the engine and realized something had shifted inside me, something Rowan never thought I had left. And I couldn't know that 2 days later, that same sun would be blowing up my phone with 28 missed calls, desperate for me to answer. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were thinking about what our son said. I shuffled into the kitchen, made coffee, and managed to spill half the grounds on the floor because my hand wouldn't stop trembling. Mabel tried to help, but the two of us bending down at the same time looked like a slow-motion circus act. She bumped her head on the counter. I knocked the broom over, and we just stood there, staring at the mess, like it had personally insulted us. Normally, I'd make some joke about getting too old for synchronized cleaning. But that morning, even my humor felt fragile. I sat down at the kitchen table, the wooden chair creaking like it was sighing for me. Every sip of coffee was bitter. And not because Mabel made it, she makes it the same way she has for 40 years, but because my own son's words kept replaying in my ears. "We don't need you." Funny, because they sure needed me when that house needed a down payment, when their car broke down, when they needed someone to watch the grandkids. But I guess gratitude expires quickly these days. Mabel walked around quietly, smoothing the tablecloth over and over, the same nervous habit she had back when Rowan was a teenager slamming doors. "Maybe he didn't mean it," she whispered finally. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only thing keeping you from saying something you can't take back. Deep down, I wasn't angry at her hope, I was angry that I shared it. I went out to the garage to distract myself, pretended to fix the old ladder, even though the only thing wrong with it was me standing near it. The smell of dust and cold metal reminded me of years when Rowan stood beside me, handing me tools he couldn't pronounce. Those memories stung more than anything he'd said yesterday. Around noon, Mabel peeked out and said, "If he calls, will you answer?" I kept looking at the ladder. "Not first," I said. "Not this time." And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I meant it. What I didn't tell her was that the silence between me and Rowan wasn't empty. It was gathering weight, like a storm waiting for the right moment to crack open our world. That afternoon, the house felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice every silly little thing you usually ignore. The refrigerator made a low groan like it was complaining about life. The clock ticked louder than it should have. Even my slippers seemed to drag across the floor with more judgment than usual. I tried turning on the radio for background noise, but it played some cheerful holiday jingle that made me so irritated I accidentally elbowed the volume knob clean off. It rolled under the couch, and I stared at it, knowing full well there was no universe where I was getting down on my knees to fetch it. Mabel sat in her armchair, working on a scarf for a charity box, at least that's what she said. Honestly, the thing was so uneven I wondered if the charity might return it out of concern. "It's abstract," I said. She squinted at me. "It's warm, I nodded. So is a space heater, but it doesn't look like it went through a lawnmower. She tried not to laugh, but the sound slipped out anyway. For a moment, it felt like oxygen returning to a suffocating room. But the lightness didn't last. Not when my eyes wandered to the framed photos on the shelf. Rowan, at 5, wearing cowboy boots 2 sizes too big. Rowan at 16, pretending he didn't care that I showed up to his game. Rowan at 30, holding our first grandchild. Each picture hit like a small punch. How did the boy who clung to my leg when he was scared become the man who told me to stay away from Christmas? I sat on the couch, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees, feeling the same knot in my chest tighten. Sometimes getting older feels like watching your own life through a fog. You remember everything clearly, but you can't touch any of it. I wondered if Rowan even remembered the Christmases we spent fixing toys at midnight just to see him smile in the morning. Or if those memories were just mine now. Mabel finally broke the silence. Do you think Liana put him up to it? I shrugged. I don't know. But he said the words. And that hurt more, knowing the cruelty didn't need coaching. I tried distracting myself by reorganizing the junk drawer in the kitchen, a terrible idea. I pulled it open, and it immediately jammed halfway because something got stuck. I tugged harder, and the whole front panel broke off in my hands. Mabel turned her head slowly, eyebrow raised. Feel better now? Not really, I muttered, but at least the drawer feels as broken as I do. Even she couldn't hold back a snort at that. Still, beneath the humor, the tension between us and Rowan kept growing, stretching thin like an old rubber band, ready to snap. And I could feel deep in that quiet place inside my chest that something was coming, something I wasn't sure either of us was ready for. The following day started with one of those small humiliations that aging loves to hand out. I bent down to tie my shoe and heard something crack, and it wasn't the shoe. I froze, waiting to see if I'd just snapped in half like an old breadstick. But thankfully, it was only my pride. Mabel rushed over like I'd been shot. Are you all right? Yes, I grumbled. Just auditioning for the role of old man who shouldn't bend. Think I nailed it. I tried to shake it off. But the moment I stood up, the weight of the last 2 days settled right back on my shoulders. I walked into the living room and noticed the Christmas boxes stacked in the corner, untouched. Usually by now, I'd be halfway up the ladder, yelling at Mabel to stop rearranging the ornaments I'd already hung. She'd always pretend not to hear me, which was impressive considering she could hear me open a candy wrapper from 3 rooms away. But this year, neither of us had the heart. Instead, I sat down in my recliner, a stubborn old thing that makes a noise like a dying whale every time I lean back, and pretended to read the newspaper. I didn't absorb a single word. My mind kept circling the same question. When did Rowan stop being mine? It's a painful thing, realizing your child grows into someone you don't recognize. Maybe all parents face it eventually, but you hope foolishly that your family will be the exception. By mid-morning, Mabel wandered in, holding her phone with that expression she gets when she's trying not to overreact. He still hasn't called, she said softly. She was trying to sound casual, but I could hear the worry beneath it. Mothers never lose that. Well, I said, maybe he's taking time to reflect. She gave me a look. Reflect? This is Rowan, the boy who once blamed a broken window on a strong breeze with fists. I couldn't help but chuckle. He was very committed to that story. But the truth was, I wasn't amused. I was angry. Angry at him. Angry at myself for raising him to believe we'd always forgive him. Angry that I still wanted the phone to ring with an apology he probably didn't even rehearse. To distract myself, I decided to put up at least one decoration, a little wooden reindeer Mabel bought at a craft fair years ago. Simple task, right? Wrong. The moment I set it on the mantel, the whole row of family photos tipped like dominoes. Mabel gasped, I lunged, and we both ended up catching frames midair like 2 retirees playing slow-motion volleyball. When we were done, she wiped her forehead and muttered, "Maybe Christmas can wait." I nodded, breathless, until the house stops trying to kill us. But as we fixed the photos back in place, I noticed something unsettling. Rowan's picture from his wedding day wasn't where I remembered it. It wasn't angled the same way. Had someone moved it, or had I just never looked closely? His smile in that photo felt unfamiliar, almost forced. Maybe the distance between us had been growing for a long time, and I'd only now begun to notice. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was tight, uneasy, the kind that comes before something breaks. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm not because I was rested, but because my back decided sleep was optional at my age. I sat up too quickly. The mattress squeaked in protest, and Mabel mumbled, "If that bed gets any louder, the neighbors will think we're doing gymnastics." I snorted, "At this age? Only if the event includes paramedics and a stretcher." I shuffled into the kitchen, determined to feel useful. I decided to make breakfast a rare, heroic gesture. I cracked the first egg cleanly. The second one landed half in the pan and half on the stove, hissing like it was offended. By the third egg, the smoke detector started shrieking. Mabel ran in, waving a dish towel around like she was trying to land a plane. "Harold, what did you do?" "I cooked," I said. "Could have fooled me." We ended up eating cereal, the soggy kind which somehow felt appropriate for the week we were having. But even as we tried to laugh, the tension lingered like a bruise you keep pressing to see if it still hurts. Somewhere between breakfast and pretending to read the mail, my mind drifted back to Rowan. Not his words, those were sharp enough to cut on their own, but the way he looked when he said them. Cold. Closed. Like someone had flipped a switch inside him I didn't know existed. I wondered if I had missed the signs. Maybe I was too busy trying to be the easy father, the one who steps back so his grown son can feel big in his own house. Maybe I stepped back too far. There are moments in life when regret doesn't come at you loudly, it just settles, quietly, behind your ribs and makes itself at home. Around noon, Mabel suggested we take a walk. "Fresh air helps clear the mind," she said, which in her language means, "I need to move before I start pacing holes into the carpet." So we walked through the neighborhood slow, steady, with me pretending my knee didn't feel like a rusty hinge. Our neighbor, old Mr. Talbot, waved at us from his porch. "You two look like you're training for a marathon," I replied. "More like the retirement version, walk 10 steps, complain, repeat." Mabel elbowed me gently, but even she chuckled. Yet the small jokes, the little distractions, none of them filled the quiet space growing between us. She squeezed my hand at one point, and it struck me how much she was holding in. Wives never show the full weight of their worry. They just carry it like it's part of their heartbeat. When we got home, the answering machine blinked one missed call, not from Rowan. A delivery reminder. I felt that drop in my stomach again, that stupid flare of hope followed by the sting of disappointment. I tried to brush it off, pretending it didn't matter. But Mabel saw right through me. "You're waiting," she said softly. I didn't deny it. I didn't have to. Something in the air felt ready to snap. Like the whole house was holding its breath along with us, waiting for the moment that would finally break this unbearable silence.
I knew something was wrong the moment I woke up and found Harold standing in the living room wearing 2 different socks, one striped, one plain. He wasn't even aware of it, just staring at the window like the snow might spell out an answer he'd been waiting for. That's how men his age cope. They don't talk, they just stand in doorways looking tragic. "Nice fashion choice," I said, touching his arm. "Very experimental." He blinked, looked down, and muttered, "I did that on purpose." He absolutely did not. I made us both tea, real tea, not that sad decaf he pretends to enjoy. The steam fogged the window, and for a moment I saw the reflection of the two of us, older, softer, but still a team. At least we hadn't forgotten how to care for one another. But even as I handed Harold his cup, I felt the tension inside him like a coiled spring. When a man stays quiet too long, it's never peace. It's pressure. He sat down heavily as if the chair owed him support after the week he'd had. I brushed a bit of lint off his shoulder. He always collects it somehow, even in rooms without fabric. "He'll call," I told him gently. Harold didn't look up. I don't want him calling because he thinks we're waiting. But he was waiting. Anyone could see it. I tried to distract us by baking something simple, banana bread. I've made that recipe for 30 years. But that morning? Disaster. I forgot the baking powder, misread my own handwriting, and somehow managed to drop an entire banana on the floor. It splattered like a crime scene. Harold raised an eyebrow. "Feel better now?" "Not unless you pretend it tastes good later," I replied. He smirked barely, but it was enough to loosen the knot in my chest. Still, The silence from Rowan was beginning to shape itself into something uglier. Because a son who could speak to his parents like that, a son who could go days without checking on them, that wasn't just thoughtlessness. That was cruelty wearing the mask of adulthood. Around noon, while Harold pretended to reorganize a bookshelf he's ignored since the late 90s, I heard the faint buzz of his phone from the hallway table. He didn't rush to check it, but I did. Not because I expected anything more, because I needed to know what storm was gathering beyond our walls, a number we didn't recognize, a voicemail icon blinking, and for a split second, something cold crawled up my spine. I didn't press play, not yet. I stood there holding the phone, feeling the weight of whatever waited inside that message, and I knew our quiet suffering was about to reach its breaking point. Something was coming. Something that would force all of us to face truths none of us were ready for. I held Harold's phone like it was something alive, something that might bite if I pressed the wrong button. The voicemail icon blinked steadily, almost impatiently. I could hear Harold humming in the other room, a tuneless, wandering hum men make when they're pretending they're busy but actually just avoiding their feelings. His humming always goes flat when he's worried, and right now he sounded like a deflated accordion. I finally pressed play, and the message wasn't Rowan. It was a woman's voice, shaky, rushed, almost panicked. "This is Dr. Hensley's office, please. Have Rowan call us back immediately," she said. "It's regarding his father." I froze. His father? Harold's father has been dead for 17 years. I replayed it 3 times just to make sure my ears weren't staging a rebellion. Each time, the same words, the same urgency. I walked into the living room slowly, phone in hand. Harold was standing on a stool he had absolutely no business climbing at his age, trying to fix a crooked frame. "Harold!" I yelped. He jumped, lost his balance, and grabbed the curtain like it was a lifeline. It tore halfway down the wall. "For heaven's sake, woman, warn me before you shout!" he barked, hanging there like a confused grandfather clock ornament. I helped him down eventually and handed him the phone. He listened to the voicemail, eyes narrowing with every second. "Why would they call him about me?" he muttered. Then it hit him, and I saw the realization spread across his face. Someone must have given them his number. Only one person had access to that information. Only one person had recently decided we weren't needed. "Rowan," he whispered, voice heavy, shoulders sinking. I reached out, steadied him. "Maybe it's a mix-up." "No," he said, shaking his head. "If a doctor's office called him about me, then he might think something happened to me." And for the first time in 2 days, I saw fear in his eyes, not pride, not anger, but the raw fear of a parent who realizes his child might be scared too. Then Harold looked at the call log. His face changed, his breath caught, and he stepped back like the phone had burned him. 28 missed calls. All from Rowan, all in the last hour. And just like that, the ground under us shifted not with relief, but with the sudden knowledge that whatever was happening, it wasn't over. It was only beginning. Harold stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. 28 missed calls, the screen looked almost frantic, like it was shouting at us. I'd never seen that many calls from our son in all the years he's been married. I took the phone gently from Harold's hands. Before he dropped it, he'd gone pale. And when he goes pale, his fingers lose all their good sense. "Should we call him back?" I asked. Harold rubbed his face. "Not yet. If I answer now, I'll either cry or yell, and I'm too old to do either gracefully." He tried to sit, missed the chair by an inch, and landed with such a thump that the cat from next door, who frequently visits us uninvited, shot out from under the table like a furry missile. Harold groaned. "At least the cat's reflexes still work." "I'd say yours worked too," I teased. "You just reacted, downward." But the humor was thin, forced. Underneath it, worry was chewing at both of us. I replayed the voicemail on speaker this time. The doctor's office, the urgency, the mention of his father, or rather, Rowan's belief about Harold's father. The pieces started fitting together in the most ridiculous, heartbreaking way. "Harold, do you think Rowan thought you were in the hospital?" "He better not think I died," Harold muttered. "If anyone's going to announce that, it's me." But the truth was settling. Rowan had gotten a medical call about his father, assumed it meant Harold, panicked, called 28 times, and probably imagined the worst. And instead of feeling triumphant or vindicated, All I felt was a heavy ache in my chest. Because even after everything he'd said, even after the cruelty of that Christmas command, our son still feared losing us. Fear is a strange thing, it brings out the truth faster than love sometimes. Harold stood and started pacing, which is always comedic because he can never pace in a straight line. He bumps into furniture, mutters at inanimate objects, and somehow manages to knock over only the lightweight things: a magazine, a tissue box, once even a plastic plant. This time he bumped into the coat rack. Twice. "I don't know what to do, Mabel," he said finally, stopping near the window. "If I call now, he'll hear the hurt in my voice. And if I don't, he'll think I'm gone." His words sank into the quiet of the room. "That's the point," I said softly. "He's afraid. And maybe it's time he felt what fear of loss actually means." Harold looked at me, startled. I'm the gentle one, the soft voice, the warm tea, the knitted scarves. But even gentle hearts have limits. I took his hand. "We didn't choose this distance, Harold." He pushed us out. "Maybe now he'll understand how quickly life reminds you what matters." He swallowed hard, eyes shining with something deeper than anger, or pride, grief, maybe, or love wearing grief's mask. And then the phone vibrated again. Rowan's name, call number 29. And it rang louder this time, not in volume, but in meaning. The phone buzzed on the table like it was alive, Rowan's name flashing again and again, as if the device itself were begging us to pick it up. Harold hovered over it, hands twitching, pacing in that crooked little figure eight he always does when he's torn between pride and panic. At one point, he stepped on his own shoelace, stumbled, caught himself on the counter, and muttered, "This is why I stopped jogging in '92. Even in that moment, I almost laughed, but his eyes were full of something raw. Regret, fear, love all tangled up in one man who never learned how to voice any of it. "Harold," I said softly, "you have to breathe." "I am breathing," he insisted. "Then breathe quieter. You sound like you're inflating a tire." He tried to smile, but it cracked halfway. The phone buzzed again. Call number 30. I finally stepped forward and pressed my palm over it, not to silence it, but to anchor us both. "Before you decide," I said quietly, "think about what answering means. And think about what not answering means." He closed his eyes. "If I answer now, he'll think everything is forgiven." "And is it?" I asked. His silence told me the truth. Harold isn't a cruel man, far from it. But he carries wounds the way some men carry tools. Always ready, always within reach. And Rowan's words had cut him deeper than he wanted to admit. The buzzing stopped. For the first time in hours, the house was silent. Then the text messages started, one after another. "Dad, please call me. Dad, it's urgent. Dad, I think something happened. Mom, where are you? Why isn't anyone answering? Please." Each message felt like a knock on our door, shaking something inside both of us. I watched Harold's shoulders lift and fall, like he was trying to hold back 30 years of fatherhood all at once. He sat down heavily on the edge of the sofa. "You know what hurts the most?" he said. "He cares now because he thinks I'm gone, not because he wants us." I sat beside him, placing my hand on his knee. Sometimes fear wakes up love that's been sleeping. Sometimes it reveals what pride hides. But I could see it, the crack forming in Harold's anger. The part of him that was relieved. The part of him that wanted to grab the phone and shout, "We're here, we're alive. We've always been here." He didn't reach for it. Yet, outside, a gust of wind rattled the window, the kind of sound that makes you feel the world shifting. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about a voicemail or missed calls. This was the moment a family breaks or repairs, depending on what comes next. And the decision was sitting right there, in Harold's trembling hands. Harold sat there so long, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing, that I wondered if he'd slipped into some quiet place inside himself. The phone lay on the table between us, small, black, harmless looking, and yet it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. It buzzed once more, then stopped, as if even the phone was exhausted from all the pleading. Finally, Harold let out a long breath. "Mabel," he said, voice low, "I don't want my son learning the value of his parents through panic. I want him to learn it through truth." I squeezed his hand. "Then tell him the truth." He nodded, slow but steady, like a man accepting a burden he'd avoided for years. He picked up the phone and dialed. 1 ring, 2, 3. Rowan answered so fast his voice cracked. Dad, are you okay? Please, please say something. Harold stayed quiet for a moment, not to punish him, but because he needed that pause, needed to speak from somewhere deeper than hurt. I'm alive, he said finally, but I'm not okay. I watched the words hit our son even through the silence on the other end. Harold's voice didn't tremble. It didn't break. It carried decades. Love, disappointment, pride, sorrow, all in one breath. You told us to stay away for Christmas, Harold continued. You said you didn't care about us, and now you care because you thought I died. That isn't love, Rowan. That's fear. Rowan choked out something maybe. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't mean it. His voice was a wobbling mess, desperate and ashamed. And for the first time in days, something in me softened. He was still our boy, just buried under pride, under bad habits, under the wrong influences. Harold let him speak, but he didn't rush to comfort him. That was new and necessary. When Rowan finally quieted, Harold said, We'll talk, but not today, and not because you're scared. We'll talk when you're ready to treat us with the respect we deserve. It was the gentlest boundary I'd ever heard him draw, and the strongest. Rowan whispered, Dad, I want you here for Christmas, please. Harold shook his head, even though Rowan couldn't see it. No, son. This year, you come to us. If you mean what you say, you walk through our door. There was a silence on the line, but this time it wasn't cold. It was full of something breaking open. I'll come, Rowan said. Both of us will. Harold hung up and leaned back, closing his eyes, not in relief and release. The weight he'd carried since that awful day finally loosened. I cupped his face in my hands. You did the right thing. He opened his eyes and smiled tired, soft, victorious. For once, Mabel, I finally did. And on Christmas morning, when our doorbell rang and Rowan stood on our porch with his wife, no arrogance, no excuses, just humility, Harold didn't gloat. He didn't punish. He didn't even make a speech. He simply stepped aside and said, Come in. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's being strong enough to wait for the moment someone realizes your worth, and walking into that moment with your dignity intact.